Hi everyone, I'm going to try and be brief. I'm so wordy, as you all know. So, first off, on the experience of fiction, a few things that I wrote down that really meant something to me. He says that children, especially, are known to be very, very creative, and some would say more creative than adults. However, they gravitate towards the same stories over and over and over again. There's a pattern that they like. They seek the familiarity. It makes them feel safe. At the same time, adults, when they reach for literature or fictional stories that speak to them, or just they read for entertainment, they choose something from a pattern that they like, which I think is true of all genre fiction. The readers of any genre really expect a certain thing, and they want to see that, and it's safe for them. It's what they expect. It's a way for them to escape. And the other thing that he talked about was about that I loved, and anybody I think that reads historical fiction would also love as well, is that we talk about fictional characters as if they're here and alive and now. So, like, when we discuss characters, or even in a show, in movies, in literature, we talk about them as if they exist, and they're not figments of our imagination. Whereas when we talk about historical people, we talk about them as if they've been deceased and gone. So I think that's really interesting, because I think it shows that we as humans, we really do latch on to these stories, these fictional tales of these people that become so interesting to us and so ingrained into our fabric that we feel as if they're alive. Like, I know that when I finish a book, I'm sad. I miss the characters. When someone is killed off, I'm sad. I miss that character. It makes me upset. It's a very emotional response. So I think that is absolutely true. We kind of love these characters. And he talks about when Sir Conan Doyle tried to kill off Sherlock Holmes, he couldn't get away with it. His fan base went insane. So he had to dust off the old stories and everything else that he was doing and concentrate on Sherlock Holmes again. He needed to change the story to make him more alive. He needed to change the story so that Sherlock Holmes would still be alive. Much in the same way that children, what they read, they don't really have characters that die, or if they do, it's not forever type situation. However, I kind of look at that against George R.R. Martin, who just literally kills everybody that you love. So it's interesting to me because it's a gamble, because how do you know when to kill off a character? Like, it's an emotional gamble. So he talks about character development a lot, and I think character development plays into that whole thing of the person falling in love with the character. The character helps to propel the story. If you're getting to know and love the character, you're going to want to know what's happening to them, that sort of thing. So I like that sometimes, starting with a character kind of resonates with me, because that's kind of how I start my stories. Is not like with an action or a plot or a theme that I want to get out, but it's usually based on someone or something, and usually someone or something in my real life. Don't tell anybody in my real life that I said that. So, in novel ideas, I read Michael Chabon's interview, and he had a number of things that it's the way I would love to write, but it's not the way I can write, I don't think, or maybe I'm just not a skilled enough writer to get to what he's saying. It'll come. So, he says that when he gets stuck in a story, or he feels like his story is weak, it's generally always because of the character, that he hasn't developed his character enough. And so that resonated with me, because I again, just like Molina had talked about, the character can propel the story. So in the case of Chabon, he does use the character to propel the story. So he wants to take a step back and look at it. The other thing that I found interesting, and this is actually how I ended up doing the novel that I'm working on now, because I feel like I made a huge mistake by not outlining, but he starts with a novel. He starts the novel just organically. He lets it flow. And he doesn't exactly know the story. He doesn't exactly know all the characters. he just lets it flow until he gets to the middle. Then he stops, rereads, outlines, gets rid of stuff that doesn't flow with the story at all, adds stuff in that needs to be in the story, and goes from there. And I found that I have never heard anybody doing it that way. So I find it really interesting that he does that. So he's part pantser, part planner, which is really, it blew my mind. Because I'm in the case right now, that's exactly what I'm doing it, but I'm in a place right now where that's exactly the way I'm doing it, but I'm doing it that way because of an accident. I'm doing it that way because it didn't go well. I want to be a pantser. I want to be someone that can just sit down and just have the words flow forth from my fingers, you know, but that's not me. I have to plan. I don't know. Like for me, if I plan, then I can concentrate more on the words that I'm writing, rather than moving the plot along. So like short things, I don't really plot. I pants. And so I think that feels good to me. It feels right, but it's not the way that I can write a novel. And like I said, maybe it'll come. I think it's interesting the way he said that. So, also, he talked about writer's block, and he basically said if you're disciplined enough to sit down every day, the same time every day, for the same amount of time every day, you'll have good days and bad days, but something will be accomplished. And so you won't run into that writer's block, which is really good advice that I think I need to take. So, how's your experience as a reader of fiction influenced your approach to writing it? First of all, my experience as a reader has changed drastically over the past year. I tend to be the type of person in the past that just gets swept away with stories. Like I said earlier on, they kind of play as movies in my head, not really like I'm reading the words. They just kind of, like it becomes real in my imagination. And I don't get caught up in trying to analyze what this person's doing, what that setting is there for, why is that green couch there, why is there a yellow rose? I just let the story happen and kind of sit back and, But as I started to learn how to read for the craft, my reading has drastically slowed down because I want to notice these things. I want to see, okay, I'm being carried away by this character, but I need to slow down because I want to know what that author's doing to make me get carried away. So that's what's happening. And it's the same way as like when I first learned photography. Before I learned photography, I would look at the world and yay, it's beautiful. Ooh. But once I learned photography and once I took that first photography class, it changed the way I see the world. When I took that first photography class, it changed the way that I see the world. I no longer see it as a whole. I see it in its parts. And I look at all of the parts and I analyze them. So like the contrast, the colors, the color balance, you know, the everything in it. Like I sit, so taking a walk is like a magical experience now, when before it was like nice, but now it's like, oh, you know, it's a completely different experience. And the same thing with learning typography. If you love someone, don't ever teach them typography, because the fact of the matter is that bad typography is everywhere. And once you know good typography, it's really frustrating. So I feel like almost reading for the craft is almost the same as these things. You're learning to read to look for certain things that the authors intend. And it's a good thing. And I like it, and I feel like my reading is so much more rich now, but every once in a while I do want to sit back and just read for fun and read to have that movie play out in my brain. I kind of miss that movie playing out in my brain thing, because it doesn't happen when you read for craft. How has my personal writing process evolved? I already touched on this earlier in the video, but I realized over the past year that I really need to outline, and I need to take the process step by step. I need to create the characters, which I want to do first. Then I create the setting, and then I plot it all out, like according to chapter. That's what I'm trying to do. I would love to be a pantser. I would love to just sit and have the words evolve, but that just isn't a reality for me. Like I said, for short fiction, sure, I can do that. But for novels, I just write myself into a watch, which I've already said. So yeah, I need to plan, and that's something that I wasn't doing before. Also, I'm paying attention to more to, symbolism and things like that I wasn't necessarily concerned with before, and different ways that words can be used to show beauty or terror or happiness, any of these emotions. So I'm paying more attention to word choice, I think. So yeah, but I am definitely, I think I want to be a pantser. I am plotter. I don't know. Okay, bye.